Good morning, Dr. Francis.
Morning. It's great to be here.
How are you today?
I'm fine and starting to cool off a little bit here, which is even better.
Yes. You were recommended by one of my friend, Galen. So when I read about you, you are doing great work. And on behalf of Elder Climate Action, I'm really impressed with your work. Can you please tell me a little bit about yourself?
I grew up in West Virginia. I'm a mostly retired physician, mostly psychiatry, but also some health policy and integrative medicine work in that. I'm a retired U.S. Navy captain. Most of my medical career, although not all of it, was active duty in the Navy. I've been concerned about the environment and interested in those issues for a long time, but until several years ago, I just sort of saw climate as one of many issues that was important, but didn't really stand out. But eventually decided that was where I wanted to focus. So I retired, oh gosh, how long has it been? About 5 years ago. And decided, partly so I would have more time, and also as a federal employee, there's some things that are awkward in working in issues that become political. So in some ways, it's very helpful to be retired.
Wonderful. Please tell me more about Elders Climate Action.
Elders Climate Action is nationwide in the United States. Although I was on a call not long ago, and someone popped up from it was Tanzania. He had a really bad internet connection, so we didn't get a chance to talk very much. But we focus on things in the United States. We have chapters around the country, although we also have a number of members who are not in chapters. And we focus on primarily on systems issues with not so much in how to compost, although that's an important thing to do, but more in terms of how do we move away from fossil fuels? How do we make it possible for everybody to compost? How do we come up with these larger solutions? Now, and different people will do different things. Like there's some people in my chapter who love libraries, and their big thing is library displays and book clubs, and that can be a wonderful way to reach people. I also know people whose big thing is to go to protests. So, I do a lot of policy work, mostly at the state level. So there are different ways that people approach things. I work mostly nationally with the Education Committee, and we do a national call 10 months out of the year. We take off November and December because we do it in the late part of the month, and nobody really wants to be on a Zoom call on Thanksgiving. But with speakers about important topics and chances for our members to learn about those topics, to ask questions, usually have an action for them to take related to that. We also do special workshops, and we send out newsletters and action alerts to let people know what's happening and opportunities for them to take action in a way that's easy for them to do. Because we know that most people are living busy lives, and they don't have time to read 500-page reports or glue themselves to a building. But what can they do that will help move things forward? So we really try to focus on that and on helping our chapters do things in their communities and around the interests of their members.
Wow, this is great work. I watched I would say most of the videos on YouTube. When Greta Thunberg took climate action, from that time I was thinking, why not elder climate sort of similar type of action? And later when I came to know about elder climate action, this is really need of the day, I feel.
We try to do a lot of our work intergenerationally. We frequently have youth speakers on our calls and at our workshops, and try to find other ways to reach out to to young people, and also to the generations in between, that people tend to step back from activism once they get into their careers and start having children, which makes sense because they're very busy. On the other hand, a lot of people are starting to see, especially parents, that this is the future of their children, and this is something that they really have to do. So we collaborate with groups like the Sunrise Movement and with Moms Clean Air Force, but also with other elders groups like Third Act.
Wow, it's a really, really great work. I had many years of experience working with teachers and parents. In fact, in DC, we started a project called Little School for Parents. And always I was designing curriculum and developing courses on peace education, ecological education, social entrepreneurship type of education, or holistic education. Yeah. I would love to join Elder Climate Action, and maybe I would participate in your event. I would be happy to do that. Yeah.
I'm told that our youngest member is 18, although I haven't verified that myself.
Thank you for telling me this. I was not quite sure if I can join, or there is certain type of requirement or certain type of age requirement. I was not sure, but
all people have to do is go to our website, eldersclimateaction.org, and fill out a really short form. You don't have to, there are no dues. There's nothing, you don't have to show up for anything. And we love it when people show up, and we love it when people make donations, but we want to make it as easy as possible for people to be involved.
I would definitely do that. Yes. So Dr. Francis, you're a medical doctor, and I'm really interested in knowing the link between climate change and COVID-19. As we are familiar how tough it was at that time, I was just wondering, what could be the link between these two variables or two aspects? So could you please talk a little bit about this?
It's something I think we're still learning about, but one thing that most people, including most physicians, don't think much about is that viruses are constantly evolving, and they can do it really fast because they have extremely short lifespans. And they, if you even call them lifespans, it's debatable whether viruses are even alive, but they do what they do very quickly. So they change very quickly. That's the reason the flu shot's different every year. And that most viruses don't affect humans. That they mostly, actually, there are viruses that affect bacteria, there are viruses that affect plants, there are lots of viruses that affect animals. And this process of evolution in viruses is going on all the time in all those species. And not exactly climate change per se, but one of the things that's driving climate change is deforestation and people kind of moving into environments they were not in before and encountering wildlife they never encountered before. So when that happens, there's always a risk of one of these viruses making the jump, because not every virus that hops into humans causes a great problem, but they can. We don't know exactly how that happened with COVID-19. We don't know, we can't trace it back completely. Well, there's really a lot of people working on it, but it almost certainly did come by some mechanism from a wildlife source into humans. And in humans, this was a whole new thing. And frequently, when a new virus affects humans, it's not pretty because our bodies have no experience, we have no immunity, and it can become very serious. And because we are so connected now globally, if a virus is very contagious, which respiratory viruses like COVID-19 tend to be, it can spread very quickly around the world. So that's a big part of how it started. Another thing that we notice related to climate change is not quite climate change itself, but another big driver of climate change is burning fossil fuels. And burning fossil fuels causes a huge variety of air pollutants to be released. And it's not even, although the carbon dioxide spreads pretty evenly around the world because it stays around for a long time and it spreads easily through the atmosphere. Most air pollutants tend to be more concentrated in the place where they were emitted. So you see, like in cities where you have a lot of diesel buses, a lot of car traffic, a lot of trucks maybe, you see high levels of certain pollutants. And you can see it other places like around incinerators, around power plants. And it tends to be an environmental justice issue because the people who live in the areas with the worst pollution are not generally the people who are making six-figure incomes. So they tend to be your more vulnerable communities, more people of color, more low-income people. And we know from very good research done during COVID-19 that people who were exposed to high levels of air pollution over several years were much more likely to die of COVID than people who had less exposure. Now, we don't know how long it takes for that to make a difference because these are very hard studies to do. You can't just ask people to go sit in a really nasty place and then get COVID-19.
Yeah.
You have to kind of look at what's happening around the world. But there's a very, very clear link between exposure to air pollution and severe COVID. So if we could get rid of those sources of severe air pollution, it would be helpful for many, many reasons, and it would do amazing things for the climate.
Wow, very insightful. So, Dr. Francis, as we know, climate change is one of the biggest challenges humanity is facing. And what do you think we should do?
I think it's a tremendously interesting and difficult question because there's a lot that we can do. I think one thing is just to realize that there is a lot that we can do, that there are people now saying we're doomed, there's nothing we can do. We should either all build our bunkers in New Zealand or just party like the apocalypse is coming. And I think that's a huge mistake.
Yeah.
We can't keep climate change from happening.
Yeah.
It's already happening. We can do a lot to make it less and help move things back to a more stable climate over time. So I think the first thing is just to realize that there are solutions, and then to realize that you need to be part of that solution. That the other thing people do sometimes is go, oh, somebody is going to solve this. Some brilliant engineer, some tech entrepreneur, the government, somebody. But at least for people who live in a democracy, to some degree, the government is us. And even if you don't live in a democracy, hopefully there are ways that you can start to inspire change. Maybe a small change for a start, change in your own life. But those small changes, they can be really helpful. And I would never discourage anybody from, riding their bike to work or, or getting a heat pump or composting their food scraps. But add all that up together, it's not enough. We have to work together. If you live in a country that has elections, you need to learn about the candidates and vote and try to get your friends and your neighbors and your family to do that and to think about how it's going to affect our future and our climate. To contact your representatives. And those of us who are good about voting sometimes have this idea that we can then forget about everything for 2 to 4 years because we elected the people to take care of it. Well, that's certainly better than not electing them to take care of it, but they need our support. There's a story that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, when he was president of the United States, some people who were advocates for a particular issue that President Roosevelt cared deeply about came to meet with him, and they explained their proposal in detail. And he said, basically, that's a great proposal, now make me do it. That they need public support, that even the strongest leader can't go out there and make things happen by themselves. And we don't want that to happen. That would be, an authoritarian government. We need the people to get behind, our leaders and push them ahead and push them and make our voices heard. And there are many, many different ways of doing that. Also helps if you learn about what some of the solutions are. It's a great book called Drawdown. It's been updated now on the Project Drawdown website that explains in a fair amount of detail some of these solutions and how we can get there and why they're important and what their other benefits will be. Because for many of these solutions, it's not just, oh, well, we fixed the climate, that's good. But you can reduce air pollution, you can reduce water pollution, you may improve equity. There many other good things that you can do if you do it well. And any solution can be done badly in anything in life.
True,
but
true.
but if we do these things well, they'll have benefits that go beyond the climate.
True. When I think about the solution, especially younger generation, they come up with a beautiful solution, Dr. Francis. I recently worked with the summer rise students. They came up with a solution that marries between economy and ecology. Because it's in global context, in my opinion, if you only just take ecological issue, just let's say just composting and other stuff, that is kind of missing the whole other chunk, other half. That is because many people are struggling to find job, to find day-to-day living. For example, in Nepal and many countries, I can say Himalayas are melting. They are not doing much harm for environment, but whatever they could do for living, they have to do. There's no choice. Is here too. They want to, many of my students, they really want to do something good, but at the same time, they have to make money too. So that's the reason, again, connecting to the same point, I want to do something for ecological entrepreneurship.
Jonathan Foley, who is the executive director of Project Drawdown, I'm not going to get this quote exactly right, but I read yesterday was talking about every job is an environmental job or climate job, potentially. Certainly to the extent that people can find something that's a great fit for them that is clearly about the climate, that's great. But if you're a teacher, you can find ways to talk with your students. If you're a physician, you can find ways to talk with your patients. If you run a business or you're an executive in a business, or even sometimes if you're at a different level in a business, you can look at ways that your business can do better. And maybe if you're the entrepreneurial type, you'll start a business that will make things better in some particular way. So there definitely people have to make a living, and that can be a huge quandary till you get to the point where you can say, okay, I don't have to have a paycheck coming in this month. But I think there's more and more understanding of how many opportunities they are, both explicitly working for climate and finding ways to do it in jobs that on the surface seem unrelated.
Yes. So, Dr. Francis, I want to take you to your past. How were you when you were a child? How your interest, passion, hobbies evolved?
As a little kid, I liked to read a lot, and I was very interested in science and in nature. Went to Girl Scout camp and did all the things that Girl Scouts do. The Children's Museum where I grew up had this thing called rock hounds, where we would go out and collect fossils and learn about this. This used to be the bottom of an ancient ocean, and these creatures there. Some of these have descendants now. Many of these have gone extinct, and what they were and how did that happen, and just the idea that you could find something that was millions of years old, part of an extinct animal on the side of a road, was kind of mind-blowing when I was a kid. So I think that was things like that I really did a lot. I really enjoyed doing. I think partly because I was very curious about scientific things, that sort of led me toward medicine and health professions. That and I like people, so that's it's a little bit easier as a clinician to talk with people and listen to people than it is if you're busy in the lab trying to sequence a genome. It doesn't talk to you very much.
Yeah. So any role model you have that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think there. When I was looking over the questions, I thought you might ask. I was trying to think who to say, because there there's so many people, it'd be easy to make a list of 20 people or 50 people.
Yeah.
Trying to think of one person, I think probably my mother was a big influence. Partly because she was working outside the home all the time that I was growing up. I was probably 12 years old before I realized most mothers didn't do that where I grew up. And her job was obviously important to her, and not as important as her family. I'm sure if it push to come to shove, but partly she needed to work. My parents needed for both of them to be working, but also I think she did get a lot of satisfaction out of her work. She did extension education for West Virginia University. And she was very much a people person, even more than I am. We used to be the family joke that she could start a conversation with a duck. She once flew from Charleston, West Virginia to Washington, D.C., which is a flight of about 45 minutes, and managed to make a fairly long-term friend of a young woman from Scandinavia who happened to be her seatmate.
Wow.
I managed to get to that level. But she was definitely very good at listening to people, engaging with people, helping them with their problems. She died at 96, and a few years before she died, I was kind of going, really, should you be trying to get that 70-year-old lady's walker into the back of your car? Maybe somebody else can take her to church. But that was just very much her, to want to be involved with people, to help them, but also to just enjoy being with them, and learn about them and be curious, and to be curious about the world. I mean, she was not as much into science as probably as I was, but she was very supportive of that. Giving I would get a microscope for Christmas. She would drive me out on all these rock hounds expeditions, and let me put way too many rocks in the basement. And that sort of thing. So I would say if I had to pick one person, that would be it.
Nice, nice. Wow, what a great mom. Could you please share some of your favorite books, maybe favorite authors?
I think I mentioned before, Drawdown. It's probably the only book I know that goes deep into wonky data and has amazing photographs and a little bit of poetry. And it's basically a beautiful coffee table book with numbers, which for a geek like me is amazing. Then I just finished reading Elizabeth Colbert's The Sixth Extinction, which is an amazing book. And although the topic in many ways is very sad, she makes it very engaging. So it's not this is so hard to read sort of thing. One thing I'm excited about reading, but I've only read like the first couple of pages, because I just heard about it day before yesterday, is a book called No More Fairy Tales. And it's a collection mostly of short stories. It also has, some of your listeners may be familiar with the book Ministry of the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson. It has 3 selected chapters from that book. The rest of it is all short stories, all about climate solutions. In very different contexts, very different sorts of stories. Like one of them is a mystery, very different approaches to it. One of the things that drew me to it is I was listening to a Climate One podcast, and they were interviewing climate fiction authors. And the woman who put together this anthology is actually a researcher who's done research on how do people respond to different types of things they read about climate. Because there's a kind of a school of thought that you really have to do climate apocalypse sort of things. This has to be very, very dark to wake people up and get their attention. And that certainly can, and it has a place. But what she found in her research was when people read stories that featured solutions, they were much more likely to be engaged behaviorally after reading the story than if they read one about how awful everything was going to be. That frequently some people would go, "Oh my God, I had no idea," but then they might go, "Oh my God, I had no idea. I'm going to go buy a gun and build a bunker," or "I have no idea. I'm just going to shut everything out. This is more than I can handle." That having that solution woven in without preaching to everybody. You have to get a VV, or you have to, whatever it is, that moved people to constructive action more. So I'm really looking forward to reading those stories.
Wow.
Fairy tales.
Yes, draw down the book, draw down. In fact, the author and the book, I love them. The solution he offers, I hope that one day I could talk to him. I sent him an email. He started as an ecopreneur, like his business he started business that is ecologically sound, ecologically beneficial. And book, so many solution and very practical solution, I believe. If you could go back and give your 16-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Learn the difference between being worried and being concerned. That one thing, my mother was amazing in many ways, but she was definitely a worrier. And I think I picked up the idea at some point that there was somehow some virtue in worrying, that this was somehow going to solve some sort of problem, which it doesn't. I mean, worry is a natural part of life, and it's not like you have to make yourself not worry or beat yourself up for worrying. That's totally counterproductive. But that to the extent that you can be concerned about a problem, look for solutions, do what you can, kind of keep some awareness of what's going on, without worrying and worrying and worrying and worrying. Or let's keep that to a minimum, that you can be more effective. And that's you can be more in control of you can manage your emotions better, not control them in the sense of just getting rid of them, but manage them in a way that's helpful, and without turning things off. I think people have the idea sometimes that like you have to be totally freaked out because that we're doomed, or just kind of don't worry, be happy. I'm all for people being happy, but that being concerned and taking action is really helpful, really important. Worrying is just kind of one of those things that happens, and just accept it and try not to let it take over your life.
True. That's a great piece of advice. I think I would ask my older daughter to listen to this. Dr. Francis, if you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
Oh gosh.
There could be so many things, but
yeah, there's I think maybe that I helped a variety of people to learn about and do something about the problems we're facing, especially the climate.
powerful. This is a hypothetical question. One thing you would like to change if you had a magic wand?
Oh, well, if I had a really great wand, we would just kind of reset the climate back to pre-industrial. That would be a really, really great wand. And if I had a kind of a good wand, but not quite that good, I think I would probably go for people understand the problem, understand the solutions, and see themselves as an active part in that.
Nice, nice. I always in my presentation I put that 320 ppm, and I always imagine if we could reset and just like as you said and go back to pre-industrial time, that would be.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to the pre-industrial climate, but I don't want to go back to pre-industrial in many other ways. I mean, if you look at what we've accomplished in terms of things like infant mortality and reducing extreme poverty, going back to pre-industrial times would be, I think, a huge mistake. But I think we really could, over time, learn to move the climate back that way.
Yes, exactly. You're right. If let's say if if we could go back and go to pre-industrial time, we would not be talking like this.
Yeah, that's true. Definitely.
We would not know each other, most probably.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's quite funny. One thing many people do not know about you.
Not a secret, but I don't know how many people know. Um, I'm I'm a Star Trek fan. Actually, today is Star Trek Day. Star Trek first episode was broadcast 57 years ago, and I was 11 years old.
Mhm.
And to me, it was like there really can be an amazing future. And I kind of grew up with that idea that the future would be better. And not necessarily in a passive way, because you didn't see any passive characters,
Mhm.
but that just kind of that optimistic, the future is going to, it can be amazing. And sort of to me, the corollary was people made that future amazing. And I'm a person, what am I going to do?
I didn't plan to ask this question, but let me ask you. Since I am a kind of futuristic type of person, always
Mhm.
thinking future, and what would happen, let's say, after 50 years or 100 years?
It's really hard to say because we're at a
Or maybe
period.
it's a ridiculous question. I don't know.
It's a very interesting question. I think there's so many possibilities. I guess that's one of the reasons that I think climate fiction is fascinating, because it frequently takes on those questions. We're at a period where our decisions in the next 5 to 10 years will have a huge influence on that. With climate, but climate is certainly not the only threat. Nuclear weapons was what we were most aware of when I was a child. They haven't gone away. What's happening with Russia and Ukraine has made that even more obvious. And there are other things that we have to deal with. So, but I think it's fairly easy to imagine and to work for a future where we have a stable climate, where we're not seeing species go extinct left and right, where we preserve beautiful wild spaces, where everyone has easy walking access to a park or other green spaces, where if you want to talk about things like homelessness and hunger, in a grade school class you have to explain what that was, because that's not a problem that they would see a problem that's been solved. So this is like a history lesson, and hopefully the history lessons will include all the things that we're trying to move past, because otherwise they're likely to creep back in some way, and where people feel like they really have a voice in their community and in their country, and maybe even beyond that, and feel like they want and need to be an informed participant in those things, and really so that everybody can live healthy lives, and peacefully together. I mean, it sounds kind of like a platitude when I say it that way, but that's one of the things I like about things like climate fiction, is you get to move it beyond platitudes to this character does this and that character does that, and they live in this particular place. But there's so many ways that could be. We could probably spin 1,000 scenarios, some of them horribly bad, some of them amazingly wonderful, and all of them plausible.
Well, any final word that I didn't ask you, Dr. Francis?
One thing that I thought you might be interested in, particularly since you're from Nepal, although it was something I was going to bring up later anyway, is Edge Girls. It's a group I recently started working with, that was founded by one of my neighbors, although I didn't know him at the time, when he retired from the World Bank, Anand Seth. And Edge Girls works with girls growing up in slums. Started out just in India, now has moved into also Nepal and Pakistan, and setting up schools for these girls with high educational standards. The girls do very well on their exams and that sort of thing, but really helping them. A lot of these girls need a lot of catch up to be able to do that, and really working with them, where they are. And these girls were getting married very early because of cultural issues, but also just the economic pressures on their families, because these are very, very poor families. And the average age of marriage of their students now is 21. These girls are going at least through secondary school. Some of them are going to universities. They're becoming successful in their careers. They bring in women in different careers to talk to the girls to get an idea. It's not, you don't have to spend the rest of your life doing what your mother does, which generally the mothers really, I mean, they want their girls in school so they won't have to live the very, very difficult, very tenuous lives that they're living. We're looking at trying to find ways to add some climate education. That's hard because there's already so much you have to pack in, because many of these girls work with their mothers in the morning before they come to school. They may have a whole variety of things they have to do after school other than homework. So they keep the school days short, but they have more days in school than a typical school year. So they have as much time overall, but it makes it hard to pack everything in. So we're trying to figure out how can we work with these girls and with their families to help them be able to be problem solvers, because they're very exposed to climate issues. Particularly with heat, because you have these urban heat islands that anywhere that you have a bunch of people living with not much in the way of trees and other green space and lots of asphalt buildings, etc., it's much hotter than it might be 5 miles away where those conditions don't exist. And that makes what is already a somewhat dangerous situation an extremely dangerous situation. So these girls are exposed to a lot of these hazards, and to help them learn to move past them. I've already learned how to deal with some other hazards. One of the board members was concerned about feeling like the girls were very vulnerable to gender-based violence, and came up with the idea of an extracurricular activity on self-defense. Well, now this was like maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Some of these girls are now representing India in international competition with their self-defense, their martial arts skills. So we have some very, very talented, determined girls who just really need the opportunity to fully develop what they can do. And that, in addition to trying to add a little climate education to their education, if you look at Drawdown, educating girls is a very powerful climate solution. Even if it wasn't, it would be important for many other reasons, but it has that important aspect too. And you get a lot of benefit for spending a small amount of money. It doesn't really take that much. It's not like we have to send them to MIT. The costs are really much more reasonable.
Wonderful. So I will be really happy to learn more about it. I have 2 daughters. The solution in drawbacks, yes, it's a really, really practical solution. They call it, if you are educating girl, you are educating not only girl, entire village, because they are the one who teach their kids. Thank you, Dr. Francis. I'm really glad you accepted my invitation to the One Humanity Community Podcast. I'm really thankful for your time, for your insightful opinion based on your research, based on your experience. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.